I'm hoping that they'll be here shortly. If you're joining us by Facebook, welcome. I'm glad to have you aboard. I have included the URL. Now, the Sunday school class may not show up, but you guys now have the power to come and make comments and answer questions directly on this Sunday school. So you are the, shall we say, the adjunct campus of this Sunday school. And so I'm thrilled if folks decide to join us. It looks like this is going to work. And I'm excited because now Restream is working with Zoom. And one of the things I'm hoping to do in the near future is have guests on, and Zoom will give me that power to do that. So I am really kind of excited that this is working out. And I hope it'll be a way to vary the programming and increase the programming on our station. Now, this is normally Hillside's remote virtual Sunday school. But again, I wanted to make this available to more folks and allow more people to see this. And really, kind of because of a lot of reasons, I'm just excited that this actually can reach outside of Hillside. We've been going through the book of Leviticus, and yes, I do have a PowerPoint. And so I'm going to go ahead and do a share screen. Now, I don't know that this is as pretty on YouTube as it is elsewhere, but this is where things are at. I'm going to make sure that I'm unmuted and bring the sound up. This is the sound going as far as it can so that you guys can hear me. Some of the visitors we've had as part of the Hillside Sunday School are older folks, and so they keep telling me to turn my sound up. I don't want to shout, but on the other hand, I don't want those who are hard of hearing not to be able to hear. So I'm going to move on to our share screen, exciting as it is, and you guys will be in on the PowerPoint, and we will start our teaching. You can make your comments on Facebook, and I will go ahead and see them. You also, again, because the link's there, you just have to hit the link. Hello to Jack. I'm glad you're here. During question or answer time, or if you really want to bring up a point, you can come on the show and do that as if you were a part of the Sunday school. And I'm really experimenting with this because I want to do some stuff maybe that's interview style or other things on the regular Wednesday night channel as part of the ways I'm trying to make that channel that much better. But I want to let you know, you are like now part of the Sunday school. I can talk to I can deal with your comments, or if you have a lively question or area of discussion that comes up, you can actually use that link and you can go ahead and be on. I don't know that any of the Hillsiders are even going to show up. But if they do, I will ping them in immediately and we will get going. So let me go to share screen here and get us underway. This is the share screen feature, and I'm hoping that that works as well where you're seeing it as it does where I'm seeing it. Oh, there we go. And so I'm not real sure what's going to end up happening here. Here's our PowerPoint. I'm going to move that over, and we're going to get started with everything. Thanks again. Some of you folks are actually more faithful than some of the Hillside Sunday schoolers. There's no other way to put that. I don't want to be mean, but it is what it is. Let's get going. We're in Leviticus 19. I haven't done this before, but I want to do this now in just a second. First of all, something I always do, I talk about last week's take-home truth. Now, that was a suggestion to me that I really liked, is to have a take-home truth at the end of each of these, and then have last week's take-home truth, so that there's an accumulation of take-home truths that creates kind of a flow. And so I'm really kind of pleased with that, to look at last week's take-home truth. If you're just tuning in, to this Sunday school for the first time, to be connected to the things which are of God, one must be separate from the things which are opposed to God. That was last week's take-home truth. So that's where we ended things as far as application last week. Now there's this week, and you'll get a take-home truth at the end of this week that will summarize some things for this week. Now, what I haven't done before is talked about the Torah portion that this is taken from. And I want to do more of that. I did do that when Sunday school was live, even though my Sunday school is comprised entirely of non-Jewish folks. But I wanted to introduce them to the fact that before there was a Bible memorization or reading program in the church or done by Lifeway or Crossway or Logos or any of those, there was an ancient Jewish reading program, and Jews still follow that. Now it's changed somewhat. There was a 3-year reading cycle at one point, and that's now a 1-year reading cycle. We are getting close to the time when that cycle starts again. Jewish people celebrate Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and then at the end of Sukkot, there's a day called Simchat Torah, which means the joy of the Torah. And that's when the reading cycle starts. So think of it like this. You're doing this Bible reading program and you finish it and you celebrate that you finished it, and you're redoing it again or restarting it again for the year. And each of these sections is called a parsha. And that's the Hebrew word for portion, because you have to read portions broken down to get through all 5 books of Moses in 1 year. And that's the way this works. Now, with that, you have a section from the writings or the prophets, usually the prophets, called the Half Torah. No, it's not the Half Torah. It's the Half Torah. It's additional, and it has some history to it, too. The problem is you have more material in the prophets and the writings than you do in the 5 books of Moses. So you get this sort of strange problem. And so where are we today as far as the parsha? Now, we're in a different place as far as the normative reading in a synagogue yesterday, because really you would be at the very end of Devarim or Deuteronomy, because Simchat Torah is really only a few days away. And that's where you start with the first parsha called Bereshit, which is in the beginning, and it covers the very beginning of Genesis. So that's where we're at. Where are we in our reading? This reading falls in a certain parsha, not the one being read in the synagogues, but still a certain parsha. It's called Parshat Kedoshim. Now, what does that mean? The word Kadosh is holy. Kedoshim is the male plural of holy. And that's why in some commentaries you will see to the section referred to as the holiness laws, because that's what Kedoshim means. So some English commentators have picked up on that and lumped all this material under the holiness laws, which is very fitting given the parsha that we're in. I haven't done that with my Sunday school class in a while since we stopped meeting personally, but I'm doing that again to give you an idea and to give you a little insight into the parasha. And maybe in future I could talk about when that parasha is normally read. It changes a little from year to year, but roughly you can look at when it would have been read that year if you're, if the reading's ahead of that. So that's the parasha. Now, the last 2 sections of this parasha deal with the treatment of the stranger among you and fair trade, and that's really equal weights and measures. Then you start into chapter 20. The chapter divisions not being inspired, but those are the last 2 sections of 19. So let's talk about the treatment of the gar, the stranger among you, the sojourner among you. And there were laws that pertained to the gar. In fact, there were different designations related to that. And so there's some treatment given there. If a stranger dwells with you, you can understand that dwells as sojourns because of the Hebrew verb there. So if a stranger sojourns with you in the land, you shall not mistreat him. The stranger who dwells among you shall be as one born among you, and you shall love him as yourself. Now, this is very important. That means that the resident alien or the stranger among you was to be cared for as a neighbor, not in a lesser status. Now, often we get this sort of thing about the exclusivity of Israel and how, because Israel was a chosen nation, there was this exclusivity. Now, given the sinfulness of human beings, it is possible that on a personal level or even on a national level, there was exclusivity. And you could point to some portions of the Talmud that have nasty and unpleasant things to say about Gentiles. But the reality is that biblical faith expected the kind treatment of the stranger. And so that's what this is essentially saying. Now, a reason given is you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Now, that doesn't mean Egypt treated them well. That means that we should be able to extend the same grace to others that we ourselves have received. We should be willing to extend the same kindness to others that we ourselves have received. There was a movie a while back ago. It wasn't all good, but it had an interesting concept to it. It was called Pay It Forward. And that's a gimmick, and I know it's kind of self-help, but the ethic behind that we should treat others with the kindness that we ourselves have received is not a wrong or unbiblical ethic. And so God tells them that. Okay. Now, one of the things we see is the type of law this is. Okay, and you saw if a stranger. Now, there are different types of laws in the Old Testament. Your 10 Commandments are what are known as apodictic law. Those are injunctions that are permanent. They're non-conditional. Thou shalt not kill. Thou just shall not kill. It's a permanent negative command in the Hebrew, but it is not a cause then. It's not an if-then sort of statement. We talk about case law in the United States, where if you do this, this results. If you speed, you will get a ticket. Okay, and this is a different type of law. Now, I used the technical term for case law, and I'm not going to worry about pronouncing that because we're not out to become lawyers here. But it's based on precedence, and it's in the form of that if-then. So when you see a law like this, you're going to see a conditional construction there. And I'm going to point out that in this case, there is a conditional structure to the law pertaining to the stranger. Okay? And the term "viki" is the key to seeing it as causal. Okay? Now, the word key in the Hebrew, and you don't have to go around saying key, but you now know, has a range of meanings to it, but it usually expresses a temporal, causal, or objective relationship among clauses in Hebrew. Now, that's fancy, but when you're doing Bible study, the way the sentence is constructed does actually matter. I was on with Anthony Rogers, and one of the fellow apologists said, "Do we really have to get into the meanings of words and things like this?" And I was a little flabbergasted because I wouldn't want to do apologetics if I didn't have a firm exegetical grasp of the scriptures and the verse that I was citing in its context and according to its grammar, because I would be opening myself up for looking really foolish and not doing a good job before God. So that you understand what this means. And I think this is good. This is just good understanding language better. Okay. It can be used as an inseparable preposition. Now, in Hebrew, you don't have to have the preposition. That's like the in, the to, the for, those sorts of words connected as separate words. You can connect them to the noun. And that's what Hebrew is called an inseparable preposition, because Hebrew likes to put a lot in a little. And so you can have a bunch of these prefixes and suffixes. And Hebrew doesn't like separate words for things. Like the definite article is connected to the noun as a Hebrew letter and voweling. And so Hebrew likes to be kind of condensed and not use a lot of words. Okay? The same particle is found in other languages. So this is something common to the languages of the Mideast. It's a feature that appears. It occurs, now look at this, it occurs 4,250 times in the Old Testament in Hebrew. Wow. So if you're looking that up in a concordance, you're going to have a lot of pages there, aren't you? And so this is a very used sort of feature. And it can be used slightly different ways. let's say I want to create a time element. Now, there's several ways of doing that in Hebrew, but I could use it temporally as when. Okay, when this happened. And that's a temporal use. It's related to time. And I could do that, and that would be okay in Hebrew. It's used in conditional clauses. Now, that's what we find here is a conditional clause where it's if. Okay. Sometimes English translators will try to do since, and that's okay too. That's a type of conditional clause, but it's a little different. With im to express a reason. So you can use ki, and if you stick it with this other Hebrew word im, you're hinting to the reader that it's giving a reason, even though this thing is sometimes used temporally or causatively. Okay. In all four uses, it introduces a given which is the result of some fact or action. Okay. And that's where we get the idea sort of if. Now, why did I do this? Because this is not epidictic law. This is case law. It covers a certain situation. Okay. Thou shall not kill is not situationally bound, but this is bound to a particular situation. Now, remember what we said about the law. Now, I got this from Josh McDowell, so I'm going to give full disclosure, but I don't think he's done as much with it as he could have. I think this is like a really cool way to dig out or apply parts of the Tanakh that are Torah law to get to the heart, to the principle, and then talk about how it carries over, but much more connected to the person of God. And see, I'm really, really excited about the idea that ethics is grounded in God. You know, I just ran into a cross against a young atheistic guy that just constantly attention seeking on Facebook, and his name is withheld, you know, because I'm not out to give him trouble. But, you know, whenever he wants attention, he'll post some sort of this argument for God debunked or that argument for God. And usually good apologists who are way up there in the stratosphere, like William Lane Craig, totally destroy whatever it is he's putting up. But he wants the attention, and so he does this. And the reality is the naturalistic worldview has no basis for the things it's claiming. In other words, it says this doesn't prove God. Yeah, but no God certainly doesn't explain this. So when this atheist guy or an atheist says, well, you know, causality doesn't prove God. Yeah, but materialism doesn't give you an explanation for causality. So your worldview, if it's true, needs to meet the same standard that you're putting my worldview under. In other words, as an atheist, you need to meet the same burden of proof that you're putting on the theist. And so the reality is that ethics is explained in terms of it being grounded in the person and character of God. And so I'm always looking when I'm reading my Bible, what about God makes this morally or ethically the way it should be? Okay, it's the way it should be because God is like this, and he made a universe like this. And I'm always looking for that. So let's deal with this. The fair treatment of the stranger among you. Well, that's the precept. Is there a principle here? Yes, the principle is equity and justice for all. You know, by the way, you know, the freedom in the land verse on the Liberty Bell is actually taken from Leviticus. Equity and justice for all. The stranger among you will not be treated in an unjust manner, because equity is to be a principle of your society. Why is equity to be a principle of Israelite society? Because God is just. See, God's nature as being a just God requires that equity be displayed in his universe among his moral agents, because trees really can't practice equity, which means that by extension Israel has to treat the stranger among them correctly. So if someone said, what is the basis for equity in our society? I would say because God is just. What is the basis for injustice being wrong? You know, if socialism and atheism are true, then black lives don't matter, white lives don't matter, human lives don't matter, and your life doesn't matter. See, it's only on the basis of a just God that you can demand equity to begin with. So that's my spiel. And I hope I don't lose a lot of people with the idea that equity is tied to God being a just God. Okay? But that's why it's there. Israelite society was to reflect God to the world. It was God's beachhead. And so equity in terms of the treatment of the stranger was not common in the Mideast. And so they were to look different than their counterparts. And this was a way they were to look different. Now what about commerce though? I mean, maybe I have to treat my neighbor personally the same way as I should treat other people, you know, in an equitable fashion. But what about cheating people? Okay. Now, God then comments going from person to sort of commerce. You shall not do injustice in judgment in measurement of length, width, or volume. You shall have just scales, just weights, and a just ephod. Now, an ephod is a measure of grain. And a just hin is a measure of liquid. So they didn't have milliliters. And so that was their grain. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Therefore, you shall observe all my statutes, all my judgments, and perform them. I am the Lord. So we have equal weights and measures here. Now, this is the same idea of equity. Why? Because equity needs to be reflected because God's just. Now, what God's done is he's changed the area, but the principle of equity is still being carried over. And the character of God is still what this is grounded in, but the application is different. Okay. By the way, one of the problems with fiat money is it's unequitable. Why do I say that? Well, what's a dollar worth today? Well, what's a dollar worth in 3 weeks? Well, what's a dollar worth in 10 years? See, if the value of a dollar keeps shifting, then the dollar becomes an unequitable instrument because it doesn't mean the same thing. When I go, the dollar drops. Now I'm using more dollars to purchase the same thing. And so now the measurement or weight is shifting, and that's not good. And that leads to unequitableness and all sorts of other economic problems, which we won't discuss. But there's really a question about whether currency should be grounded in something that's pretty unchanging. And right now, our dollar is connected to the power of our economy and our GDP. And I'm thinking that maybe really a good thing, and it's not very equitable. Now, what is the bottom line? God's holiness, what God is like, involves equity. You wouldn't have a holy God if a holy God will be an equitable God. Okay, that's what I'm really getting at. If God does not uphold equity, then he is not being holy. Now, God is like light is what I was trying to get at, and that goes back to Worthington's book. And I want to say hi to Jeff, who just came in. I'm glad you're here. Jeff, you can come on with thoughts and ideas and join us on the Zoom meeting. I'm going to leave a time, or you could just do it that way. But this is a unique opportunity. You can be part of Hillside without ever visiting Hillside. So that's just an exciting opportunity. I put that information in the description, and I put it online. And if there were other Hillsiders here, you could actually meet them. But you guys are the Hillside Sunday School today. Okay? Now, God's holiness not only means there has to be equity, but it means certain horrible examples of impure worship just can't happen. And there's a real emphasis here in the Bible. Oh man, secularists and atheists have real problems with this because God really God does. Let's not do kind of. God does really regulate worship. And some people have a real hard time with that. God prohibits false worship for very good reasons. Okay. Now, first of all, you got to know one of the worst things. I mean, paganism was horrible, but Moloch worship was like the epitome of really horrible, it was really, really, really bad paganism. If there was like good movies and bad movies, and then Moloch would be like a really horrible movie. I mean, there's just no other way to put this. The Lord spoke to Moses again and said, say to the children of Israel, whoever of the children of Israel or of the strangers, see the strangers included in here, who dwell in Israel, gives their descendants to Moloch, he shall surely be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones, and I shall set my face against that man, and I will cut him off from among the people, because he has given some of his descendants to Moloch to defile my sanctuary and profane my holy name. And if the people of the land should in any way hide their eyes from this man, okay, they don't do anything about it. Okay, when he gives some of his descendants to Moloch and they will not kill him, I will set my face against that man and against his family, and I will cut him off from among the people, all who prostitute themselves with him to commit harlotry with Moloch. And so God absolutely detests this type of worship. Now, boy, that seems awful hard here, okay? A death penalty offense for improper worship. I mean, some modern person is going to look at this and say, you mean if I don't bring my hymn book to church, you're going to stone me to death? I mean, this is just really, really harsh. And by our standards in society, we are not used to this sort of harshness, but there's a reason for this sort of harshness. I need to let you know what Moloch worship was. This was not innocently going to a different house of worship, okay? It was child sacrifice. And it was totally important to the Lord, because what we're talking about is child sacrifice. And we're not just talking about any child sacrifice. I'm going to explain this further. The death penalty by stoning was enacted. Now, that's not even, giving them, strapping them to a chair and lethal injection here. That's stoning. It's not fun. We're not talking about throwing pebbles at somebody, too. When people see stoning, they're kind of like, you mean you throw little rocks at him until he dies? No. I've seen the rocks in Israel. Okay. You're throwing really jagged, hard rocks at the person, and you're hitting them in places. And eventually you just kind of kill them by blunt force trauma to parts of their body. And usually eventually you get the head, and that's like done. That's closed head injury. And this is not fun, because the first couple times they could hit legs and arms, and things could get broken, and but you're still very conscious, and it's just not fun. It's not easy. It's not a painless death. Okay. God really, really got mad at this. If the children of Israel did not enact this penalty, God said, I'll see to it. I will undertake. This is the place where I will invade history in the life of individuals, and I will actually do things. I will take this upon myself. That's how serious this actually is. Okay, you will pay with your life. Now, what is it about Moloch worship that's so horrible? What you did in Moloch worship, okay, is you killed a child. Now, you didn't, it wasn't, how to explain this? You stoked up this burning statue. I mean, this thing was hideous. And you put your live child on the burning statue. So this child literally burns to death, screaming and wanting to, have some protection. And you're the one giving the child over. So this is like the ultimate betrayal here. The parents who are in charge of protecting this child and nurturing this child are the ones that give it over to be horribly killed nastily, and see what that guaranteed for you was prosperity and safety and peace for the next year. Yay. So it's horrible child sacrifice. And so God said, I do not tolerate. This is bad. And by the way, this had been going on among the people of the land for roughly 4,000 years, worship practices like this. And so when God goes in and takes out the nations, I always point this out. This is the thing about biblical wars. God is not taking out nice societies. He's taking out societies that have sunk morally to the level where they're irredeemable as a society. They've gotten rotten to the core. There's no way that society can be upright. It cannot recover itself morally. It is horrible killing of a child for the sake of, notice this, convenience or prosperity. Now, what is the story here? Who would want to do this? And what would ever want to receive a burnt up child who has been in agony and betrayed by his parents? What type of deity or creature, would want this? Understand that this is tied to Satan, not because I don't like it, not because it uses weird Latin words, not because it's a Disney movie. It's tied to Satan because, see, Satan hates something. Satan hates people. Now, it's not like he had coffee with people and he just didn't like certain ones and wouldn't take them to Starbucks anymore. Satan hates people because we are image bearers of God. He doesn't like the reminder. And worse yet, I'm going to invite you to read the Screw Tape letters, because yes, it's a fictional account, but man, I think they got Satan's attitude down. C.S. Lewis got Satan's attitude down pretty good. We are these physical creatures bearing the image of the holy God, in whose presence the fallen angels have to shudder, and we're bearing that image, and they don't like that image. They don't like us as God's creation. It's a reminder. And worse yet, God did things for us, us being his image. We're also physical creatures, and we're limited creatures. So these poor two-legged bipods get to be image bearers of the living God, in whose presence we cannot, tolerate very well. Okay, now Jesus talks about this. He says Satan was a devil from the beginning. Well, actually a liar from the beginning. It doesn't mean, by the way, Satan was created bad. Let's clarify this, okay? He was a murderer from the beginning, and he's a liar, and the truth, he has no truth in him. Jesus gives us a description of the enemy's operating and the condition to which the enemy has sunk. When Satan was originally made, he wasn't Satan. By the way, Satan isn't a name, it's a title. It means the enemy. Okay, Ha-Satan in Hebrew is not a name, it's a title. He's so-and-so, Ha-Satan, the enemy. And it just gets shortened to Satan. So you say like Joe the bully, and then he just starts getting called the bully by the kids in the neighborhood. Okay, he was a liar from the beginning, which means that from the point he fell, he started lying, and he wanted to wreck things and break things. Genesis tells us that everything God made was good from the beginning. When God created angels, they were unfallen. But rather than turning away from God, he makes himself to be a liar, because he opposes the truth. And so if you oppose the truth, what's left? A lie. And if you want to break and destroy lives, what are you but a murderer? And so this is a big deal. If Satan can take down human beings, he's perfectly happy. And if he can kill little innocent children, great, less image bearers in the world. And so he created this sort of counterfeit system by which you go ahead and you horribly kill your child. And of course, Moloch is then invoked for you, and you're supposed to have prosperity, convenience, and a level of peace. As far as outward opposition, your circumstances become less troublesome. Now, some people are going to get bugged. If you do get bothered by this, please do not unsubscribe. Come on, talk to me, put a comment in the passage, this is a hot issue. This election is this child thing. I'm not telling you who to vote for. By the way, I can't. I'm doing a Sunday school, and, don't drop off. It's just, I'm not your pastor, and I'm not even the pastor of Hillside. So I don't want to usurp any prerogatives or come off with more authority than I have. I have only the authority of a teacher of the Word of God. Here's the thing. I don't have to tell you who to vote for, but I'm going to tell you an issue you better consider. And then that might tell you a whole lot. I don't know. Okay? I want to stress the positions that the Christian must consider in voting. See, that's what I'm going for here. When I go into a booth, I want a candidate that lines up with certain positions that I feel are intrinsic to the Christian worldview. God is dead set against any sort of childhood killing. I'm sorry. It is what it is. God loves people. He doesn't love what they do. He's not happy with their sin, but God has a love for humankind. And I think we can say that. And I think this is true whether that child is born or he or she is still in the womb. And I'm going to say this. My daughter said, well, you can't really equate abortion with Moloch because, in the case of abortion, you're not taking a live child and putting it there. I'm going to say, yeah, there are differences between abortion and Moloch, but I'm going to say, quite frankly, that the modern pro-life movement is really about a young woman who got herself in a really bad way, and she should be helped. Okay, I'm going to say it again. But what they're encouraging this young woman to do is to sacrifice the child. And here's the way it goes. You're not ready to have a child. Your life would be so much easier if you just took care of this. And sometimes the young man involved has very low morals, and they'll say, look, I have no intention of marrying you, and I do not want to be saddled with the child. Our lives will be better if you sacrifice this child. Now, that is like Moloch worship. A child's life is being horribly taken for the sake of convenience in order to alleviate distress. By the way, that the child is not causing necessarily. In order to alleviate strife, prosperity, convenience, those sorts of things. And the biggest voices I hear for abortion are women who are in a position where their lives would not necessarily be distressed. In other words, they keep talking about how it's, the poor girl in the country, but the ones advocating abortion aren't the poor girl in the country. The ones advocating abortion are folks who maybe have other alternatives. In fact, I'm going to make a statement that several spokesmen in the Black community have made. Abortion is the largest killer of Black people. This is horrible. So here's the bottom line. Whoever you vote with, you need to be really consider whether you, as a believer, can vote for a pro-death candidate. Notice I didn't say pro-choice. Every woman has a choice, but not every woman has the right to take the life of the child she's carrying. I don't subscribe to that. So I call it the pro-death movement, because that's really what it's promoting. Please consider carefully. You may not like the other candidate. He may not be nice. He may be a total obnoxious person. I don't know. But I'm very leery of Christians voting pro-death, i.e., pro-choice, according to some. Okay? Now, the next verse deals with mediums. I don't mean medium as opposed to extra large. I mean occultic individuals. Now, these folks are still around. I remember having a gospel table, literature table, across from a woman who was, advertising her business in telling people the future. And if she had known the future, she would have known I was going to talk to her. God has some things to say. He who turns to mediums and familiar spirits to prostitute himself with them. Now, notice the use of the word prostitute there. someone once said to me that I can't make statements like forced love is rape and God's a divine rapist. God uses this sort of language all the time. Okay. It's spiritual prostitution. Okay. I will set my face against that person and cut him off from among his people. He will not get off scot-free. Consecrate yourselves, therefore, and be holy, for I, the Lord, your God, I am the Lord your God. You shall keep my statutes before them. I am the Lord your God who sanctifies you. Now let's take a look at this, okay? Why is occultism bad? I mean, let's just ask the question for a second. Let's entertain the question for just a split second. There are two reasons. Occult works on the idea of manipulation. When you see any sort of occultic practice in the Old Testament, I want you to, think deity manipulation. Okay, because that's what the occult was to manipulate spiritual beings into doing your bidding. All paganism is deity manipulation. Now, there are two problems. One, you could be invoking spiritual beings that are not the creator of the universe, in which case you're giving glory to deities that are not worthy of the position that you are giving them. So you're operating under a lie, which is already an affront to a God of truth. But you're also giving spiritual beings a position that they should not have, which is exalting part of God's creation over and above God. And Romans chapter 1 talks about that in terms of being foolishness and spiritual darkness. All right. Now, let's say you're looking to do this with the one true God. You don't mean to invoke other spiritual beings, just kind of ignorant of the names involved. Then you're trying to manipulate God. Okay? And so that's blasphemous at the very least. We do not manipulate God. Prayer is not deity manipulation. Okay? We understand when we pray, we're asking God to intervene according to his word and character. That's the best way to do prayer. And we are asking God to exhibit his attributes in the world. But we are not deity manipulating. And that is the problem with any work system or even depending upon the law to save you. You're doing deity manipulation. That's what I would say to Sanger. You mean well, but your faith is misplaced. And the result is, even inadvertently, or even though you have zeal without knowledge, because you're attempting to use Torah keeping as a way of manipulating God into accepting you. Deity manipulation is forbidden, and the occultic at best is deity manipulation, and at worst is giving glory to other spiritual beings that have no right to that glory. So it is a terribly, horribly bad thing. And so God says no, and God's holiness is such that you cannot, or he will not. And I just want to see if screen sharing allows me to decide. Okay, I was just curious whether I was just a talking head or not a talking head, but that's me. No, I'm still there. Good. It feels good to be there. Okay. It's always good to know that I'm still around. I have to check with myself sometimes. Just the way it is. God's holiness means he can neither be manipulated, nor is he like any other being in existence. So when we say God's holy, we mean he is distinctly different than every other being. He is transcendentally, or he's metaphysically separate from any other being. And then he is also morally separate from all evil. So deity manipulation is contrary to his holiness. And that's why he mentions his holiness right after mediums and Moloch, because in counter-distinction to Moloch and mediums, I, the Lord your God, am the one who brought you out of Egypt. I'm the one, and I sanctify you. Now, if you're listening at all and you can get back in, there's a final point to be made that's certainly worthwhile, and I don't want you to miss it. Who sanctifies who? Okay, I really like this point because God tells us who does the sanctification. Consecrate yourselves and be holy, for I, the Lord your God, are your God. I am the Lord your God. You shall keep my statutes, perform them. I am the God who sanctifies you. Now, let's see if I understand this correctly. I'm supposed to be holy, so I'm being commanded to be holy because God sanctifies me. But isn't sanctification being holy? This is part of the important thing I want to get at. What you see is enabled response, not God doing it for us. And I will end up touching on this in relation to some key doctrines and as a plea for balance among some Calvinistic friends. You cannot treat these things as things God just kind of zaps you with on Tuesday. God is not going to zap you with sanctification. Okay? You are still involved in the process, yet it is God who sanctifies you. And the picture to me that is really the coolest one is that child walking with his parents, enabling his balance and steps. And I'm going to get back to that because what we're going to do, hopefully in the future on Wednesdays, we're going to take a few shows and learn how to do theology from biblical to systematic. Because what you do is you start with biblical theology and then you draw your systematic theology from that. But too many people want to belong to a camp systematic theology wise, and they're starting with their systematic theology, and then they're going back and they're looking for texts that support it. And I think that is a cool thing to do some programs on. It's just show how you move from biblical theology to systematic, and how biblical theology should be the way where you start, and then systematic theology answers to biblical theology. And I think that's really cool. And this is the same way. God sanctifies us, but we respond. It's an enabled response. We can't sanctify ourselves. We never sanctify ourselves, but we can consecrate ourselves as God enables us so that we are sanctified. And that is the great both and of Scripture, and it needs to be in any systematic theology you follow. If you surrender human response for divine doctrine, you misrepresent God and you misrepresent man. If you exalt human response over divine sovereignty to where divine sovereignty then ceases to exist, you dishonor God and you dishonor man. There has to be a balance. So God is our sanctifier, which is going to lead us to our take-home truth. Isn't that neat? So here's our take-home truth. How does God sanctify us? Does he sanctify us by the law? Well, he uses the scriptures, yes. But who does the sanctifying? Who is the sanctifier as I'm responding to God sanctifying me? How does this work? God in the person of Jesus sanctifies me. Okay? We are sanctified only through Jesus and by Jesus. We respond as we're being sanctified as part of the process, but it is God who ultimately takes the responsibility. So this is hard. You are responsible to live holy, but it is God who takes the responsibility for actually sanctifying you internally. All right? Again, it's sort of like a car with a steering wheel. The driver has to turn the steering wheel, but the car has to respond. If I turn the steering wheel in my car and it's broken and it is not turning my car does not respond, then I could crank on that steering wheel all day and I would still crash into the tree ahead of me. But on the other hand, my car will never turn that steering wheel on its own. And so it's that lovely balance. And so we need to praise God that Jesus is our sanctifier. He's the one who actually has determined that he is going to bring us to the end process. How do I know that God will keep me? Because God is determined to bring me to a certain process. God has determined to bring me into a likeness of Christ. It's a hard road. Some people sanctify smoother than others. Some need more sandpaper, depending on the diamond. But this is the bottom line. God is determined to do this process with me. He is determined to see me through this process and do this process with me in the person of Jesus Christ. So outside of Jesus Christ, you cannot be sanctified. Okay? There's no one turning the wheel the right way to make this work. You got the steering wheel, but you need God to be on the inside working the wheel to keep you on the course of sanctification so you do not turn too far to the left or too far to the right. And so God is our sanctifier in Jesus Christ. Praise God. The Lord, our sanctifier, is this week's lesson. And God's holiness precludes deity worship and inequity, which is where we were in Leviticus today. So that's our take-home truth. That's where we get to, and that's our lesson. And I hope some other people who see it will get something out of it. Little controversy, but a bottom line doctrinal truth. And I'm excited that maybe there's a way to take that doing biblical theology to systematic, and then finding some features on the show with people, and then talking about the systems that exist and how they fit the criteria that we glean from biblical theology. So this is just another thing going on in my mind that I'm planning stuff for. Now, we did not have any Hillsiders, but we had a lot of folks that are our wonderful extension campus. So thank you to Jack Ray and Jeff Robinson for being here. And if you were here, that is just absolutely great. News for those on the station, since there are no Hillsiders here, I can tell you this. We have moved the broadcast up to 6 o'clock Phoenix time because I'm working on making the broadcast better, and Cox is really disappointing me from that 7 and 8 o'clock hour. So I thought maybe I could shift it an hour and maybe get on the crest of the high-speed wave like a good surfer, you know, and ride the wave. And so we're going to try this as part of making the station better and making the programs better. And so I don't know. I don't know if I'll catch the crest of the wave this week, but we're going to try this and see if it works. We're doing other things too. I don't want to bounce the station time around a lot, but I want to do those things that are going to help make things better. So hang in there with us. We're trying to get things in 5781 to a much better place towards optimization. We're optimizing what we have to make the station even better and the programs even better. And I will be speaking in California, and she has a studio, so I'm starting to get intelligentsia around me to kind of help with this process. Thank you so much for tuning into Sunday School. Again, you guys have been 100% and just there, and that is really cool. So God bless you. Sunday School did happen at Hillside, and it just happened differently. And I love that Zoom worked. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say bye, unless there are any questions, which can be done live or from there. But it doesn't look like I was controversial, but I don't think I was confusing. So that's good. Okay, well, once I turn off Zoom, this turns off. So I shall see many of you on Wednesday, and I'm busy working on that. God bless, and the Lord be with you as you start your week.